as we go through, I was going to give you guys different quotes of the founding fathers, so that you would see that substantially in putting all of these documents together, that they used the Bible and they used their faith. General principles in which the fathers achieved independence were the general principles of Christianity. That's by John Adams. I will avow that I then believed and now believe that those general principles of Christianity are as eternal and immutable as the existence and attributes of God. Without religion, this world would be something not fit to be mentioned in polite company. I mean, hell. The Christian religion is above all religions that ever prevailed or existed in ancient or modern times, the religion of wisdom, virtue, equity, and humanity. Suppose a nation in some distant region should take the Bible for their only law book, and every member should regulate his conduct by the precepts there exhibited. What a utopia. What a paradise would this region be? I have examined all religions, and the result is that the Bible is the best book in the world. That's second president of the United States. Okay. Exodus 35:21. And they came and everyone's heart stirred within him, and brought and everyone whose spirit moved him, and brought the Lord's contribution to be used for the tent of meeting and for all of its service and for the holy garments. So let's look at the context. Let me see if I can move this around a little bit. There we go. Okay. Okay, so with the tent of meeting, everybody recalls that kind of a model that was set up right there in front of you, is God's portable temple that he established with Moses, and had the people build it. Here's kind of the layout of how it was set up. Move some things around. All right, so it took, you see where fabric is now an important concern of building this temple. I mean, building this tent of meeting. Here's a kind of a layout of it for you with several descriptions that are set up. What we're going to take a look at in more detail is the basin that was built. It's kind of interesting the way God had all of this set up, because if you remember, when the Israelites finally were released from captivity in Egypt, the Egyptians not only let them go, they bribed them to go. And they gave them gold and silver and jewels and fine fabric and all kinds of things to get them to leave. So they had things at their disposal that they were carrying that turned out to be the ingredients, so to speak, of what God wanted to have done. And the idea was for them to give it up, and for them to donate it, and for them to use their craftsmanship in recrafting some of these things, especially melting down metal and making provisions in that capacity. The furnishings of the tabernacle, we're going to talk about the bronze basin for our purposes. They brought all kinds of things to them. They brought obviously fabric. They had to sew it. They had to assemble it, put it together. But this bronze basin is kind of intriguing because that was the one thing that had to have been done or there was no church service going to happen. It was imperative, if you remember, it says in Exodus 30:18, you shall also make a basin of bronze with its stand of bronze for washing. You shall put it between the tent of meeting and the altar, and you shall put water in it with which the Aaron and his sons shall wash their hands and their feet when they go into the tent of meeting or when they come near the altar to minister, to burn a food offering to the Lord. They shall wash with water so that they may not die. They shall wash their hands and their feet so they may not die. There shall be a statute forever to them, even to them and his offspring. So this was what they needed to cleanse themselves of the sacrifices they were making and cleanse themselves symbolically of sin that they were bringing to the table. So without the basin and without the washing, there's no worship, there's no service, there's no sacrifice, there's no entering into the Holy of Holies by the chief of priests. It doesn't happen. So of that, how and what did they do? Well, as it turns out, back in those days, the way that women used their cosmetics and the way that they viewed themselves was by polished bronze discs. They were not glass reflections, they were metal reflections, and they were polished to a fine frame so that they could see themselves in it. So for a woman to give up her mirror, in essence, her reflection, was a difficult thing to do. So she had to choose between prompting and primping and promoting herself or the sacrifice and the worship. And they obviously chose the sacrifice and the worship because there was a bronze basin made and it was cast, and they did have enough metal in order to do that. So when our verse that we're looking at says that they brought what was put on their minds and their hearts, this was kind of reaching down inside someone to get the things that we sometimes feel are necessities in our lives. This is a picture of it to kind of give you an idea. Pretty good size that it was. So it took a lot of polished mirrors, so to speak, to be able to do that. They also had to give up garments, they had to give up fabric, and then they had to use their skills in redesigning them and following what the plan was that God had. The cloth had to be donated, it had to be dyed, and it had to be sewn. Jewels had to be donated and crafted onto the breastplate precisely, and then attached. And adornments created, there were bells and plates of gold and chains of gold that were placed on these garments. And the craftsmen had to put their skills together. And they came, everyone whose heart stirred him, and everyone whose spirit moved him and brought the Lord's contribution to be used. So that's the context, and they kind of put it into simple language. They brought whatever they had, and God had arranged what they had. So they had to give it up. And, you know, it's kind of interesting that they got to use these things and possess these things. You kind of think they would think it was theirs, you know. They won the lottery, and they were carrying this stuff around with them. And then God says, okay, now let's put it to use and put it to my use. Let's look at the colonies. There's a guy named Robert Morris, immigrated to Maryland at the age of 13. Quick learner, he soon was an apprentice at a banking firm in Philadelphia that would later make him a partner. By the 1760s, he was a successful businessman. New taxes on the American colonies would pull him into the political realm. He was instrumental in resisting both the Stamp Act and the tea tax. By the 1770s, he was a prominent politician serving on the Pennsylvania Council of Safety, Committee of Correspondence, and the Pennsylvania legislature. He represented Pennsylvania in the Second Continental Congress. And Morris Company worked with the secret Committee of Trade in order to smuggle war supplies from France into the colonies. He personally handled financial transactions on behalf of the Congress, purchasing war supplies and buying and exporting goods in order to finance the war efforts. This is a map of kind of what was going on at the time. These are war maps. This is maps of movement. The blue lines are the Americans, and the red lines are the British. And what we want to kind of have our mindset for are the battles where the Americans were defeated, and how they ended up in Valley Forge, which was going to be their wintering place. This is a little bit of a different view of it. The Battle of Brandywine and the Battle of Germantown were two major victories that the British Army had. The Continental Army, our guys, the Battle of White Marsh and Red Bank and Princeton, and then ultimately the Battle of Trenton. So what happens here is that in the winter of 1777 and 78, the low point of American struggle was going on for independence. The troubles began the previous August when the British fleet unloaded a force of redcoats at the top of the Chesapeake Bay with the objective of capturing the American capital at Philadelphia. The Americans were routed by the British at Brandywine, leaving Philadelphia undefended. Members of the Continental Congress fled the city. They went to Lancaster and then York, where they reestablished the capital. And the British entered Philadelphia on September the 26th, in the fall going into winter, obviously. They suffered another defeat at the Battle of Germantown. So they were getting kicked around pretty good at the time. The problem that they started to run into is the same problem that things show up and happen when we're on the downside. People don't want to support something that they think is going to be a loser. So what was happening is that not only were they losing troops in these battles and losing land in the takeover of the British, but they were unfunded. They didn't have the money that they needed to purchase supplies. And in some cases, the soldiers were starting to rebel because some of the soldiers hadn't been paid in 2 years, which obviously creates a difficulty for them. So this guy, Robert Morris, who served as the superintendent of finance for the United States, began to be the go-to guy to get money to support the efforts that they have. George Washington tapped him quite often. Established the Bank of North America, which was in favor of the Americans. And it was established with a loan from France secured by Robert Morris the year before. Robert Morris ultimately ended up at one time being the largest landholder in America. He would purchase land, then use it to secure mortgages and borrow money for the American troops. And he kept multiplying that over and over again. This is an example of what he did. The Mechanics Bank, $100. It is a bearer on demand, is backed by Robert Morris's personal credit. Then as treasurer, he funded what was known as black backs, which are $10 silver certificates. Now, this is a little different setup here because this was where, in order to print a $10 bill, there had to have been $10 worth of silver that was deposited to back it up. So this was not used exclusively as the credit by Robert Morris. This was a precious mineral that was used to back it up. So these are, as you can see on the bill, certificates of deposit. This certifies that the amount of silver that was deposited would back up the paper certificate. These things are quite valuable now. Give you an idea, this was, I think, 4 years ago. We were auctioning some of these, and one of these bills went for $12,500. So, yeah, they're kind of interesting. Okay, whoops, where did I lost it a year ago? All right. So what's happening here now is that they are going for the winter, and they are in Valley Forge, they meaning Revolutionary Forces. And here's kind of a layout of how they were spread around, using the river to protect themselves on one side. They set up a wall of brigades along the southern side of it. The French that were battling with us harbored some of their troops there additionally. The problem is that the winter was severe. The resources were without, and there was no money. This is another little graphic of it for you. This is the famous painting of Valley Forge with George Washington at prayer, and he's praying for help to make it happen. So at the same time that this is going on, Robert Morris is at St. George's Methodist Church, and he's at a service that's there, and the pastor preaches on our verse. And Robert Morris was so taken by that sermon that immediately following the service, he left and went door to door to raise the money, the $20,000 that was needed for supplies and for catching up the salaries of the soldiers so that they would stay and endure the winter. $20,000 at that time was a heck of a lot of money, obviously. So this is the St. George's that you see that when you visit there. Okay, so because of Robert Morris's efforts, the Revolutionary Army continued. They survived. He kept funding it. It was said at one time that I think it was 75 to 80% of the bullets, which were steel balls or lead balls that they used in the warfare that put into their muskets, were all funded by Robert Morris. Had he not been able to do that, we would have lost the war. Now, the problem is that he was tremendously overextended. As the war wore on, he kept borrowing more. He borrowed more from France, and he borrowed from Spain. And when the Americans finally took over the country from the British and signed the Treaty of Paris, thus ending the revolution, then France and Spain wanted to call the notes in, and they wanted to be paid, and he couldn't pay. So back in those days, what happened was he was put into debtor's prison. So it's really interesting that the guy who funded the American Revolution and exposed himself all out, who brought to the service of what he thought was God's at will, ends up in jail. Now, George Washington seemed to be the only one who was concerned about that. And so he lobbied for a protection under the Temporary Bankruptcy Act of 1800, which was passed. And when it was passed, Robert Morris was one of the first ones released from the prison. So he did get him out of jail, but he still had lost everything that he had. So sometimes when things are needed and you have resources, or you have skills, or you're a craftsman, or you're a disciplined person, you're a teacher, you're an encourager, whatever you are in the ministry work of God that he wants you to bring to the table. It may be asking you for things that is all that you have. So let's take a look at a little quick one here. To do what we're called to do. That's the object of what we're doing here. Whoops. Let me go back. I lost it. There we go.
No sound.
Okay. Let me see what I can do here. Well, hang on a minute.
And in the door. Door's narrow. Looks like about the 50s.
Well, it's not coming up with the options that I wanted to give you.
Wrong with the ball.
Gosh almighty.
Hey, Dan,
Yeah.
to the right, there's the volume right down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's that. It's,
Yeah. No, you got it on.
it's
Okay.
yeah. But before it's giving me an option where I just clicked on it and said add sound. But I can't find that. There we go. Share sound. Okay, there we go. Yeah, and that wants to leave me. Now, can you hear it?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Are you the Reverend C. Charles Blackwell? Yes, sir. Well, I'm the Apostle E.F., and believe it or not, the Lord sent me to have fellowship with you. So if you could spare me a minute of your time, I'd greatly appreciate it. Come on in. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. I had this dream that I'd be meeting a man such as yourself, and the Lord told me to come right to you. And when he talks to me, I was listening for him.
Yes, sir, I see. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Excuse
ma'am.
me.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, honey.
You don't have to get up. You're welcome.
Now, in my dream, it appeared that I would talk to you about a church or starting a church joint. Talking at least never hurt nobody, so I thought we might examine the subject somewhat, reflect on it,
Yes. Well, Apostle, I don't minister no more. Now, I'm in touch with some of my people, but most of them are off and joined with other churches.
I see. Well, if I was to get with some of those people and they was willing to start up a new temple, small, would you be willing to come along with me and help me in the community?
Well, there is a possibility. You see, I don't preach no more. Now, I had 2 heart attacks in 6 months. When I get up on that pulpit and the Spirit start moving in me, praise God, I wouldn't hold back. And I can't do that no more.
Amen.
I got to take everything a little calmer these days.
Praise God.
But I pray on it, I will.
Well, you might consider it because, I set up temples all over, all over.
Tell me something. Why should I trust you? The Lord knows what you could have been or done in the past. And also, we got to look out for the devil. Because if he robbed you of your babies, he could rob somebody around here their babies. Especially if he followed you down here from wherever you come from.
Boy, I get it. I get it. Right on, right on.
Now, you say God led you to me and not to anybody else?
Yes, sir. I do believe that. Yes, sir.
If in fact he led you to me, I could accept that. If he didn't, I'm gonna find out soon enough, because he the one that's gonna let me know one way or the other. And if he did, then naturally I'd want to be with you, wouldn't I? Because then I would be with him, right? So, in other words, if he leading you, he got to lead me too.
You put that a lot better than I can, that's for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I tell you what, I'm gonna keep my eye on you. And the Lord will keep his eye on both of us. And we all three keep our eye out for the devil, all right?
You know, I couldn't help but think about Robert Morris having a discussion like that repeatedly over and over and over again to borrow money or to get money from wealthy people to finance the American Revolution. So I felt like that was kind of very similar. So what about us today? All right. Well, I thought the best thing we could do is to talk about, that's why I sent you guys the video clip that I sent you out earlier, is that we've got 3 tools that we can count on and call on. The Declaration of Independence, obviously, being one of them. Constitution being a larger share of it. And then the Bill of Rights being the third document that we have that kind of lays everything out as far as how this country should be run, who should be running it, what they're doing, and how to go about getting it done. So I put this together for you. It's mainly for your slides that I'm going to send you so that you would have those to be able to look at. The purpose of the Bill of Rights, the goal is to limit the power of the federal government, limit the power of the federal government. Okay. So what do you think these amendments are that they're wanting to add to the Constitution? Are they amendments that limit the power of the federal government? Seems to me they're ones that give the federal government powers that are currently being administered by the state. Am I wrong in that?
You're talking about currently?
Yes.
Yeah, it seems like the government is trying to gain more power.
Yeah. The Fed is anyway. Yeah. And the goal is to protect the natural rights of individuals. The author, the ideas are taken from the state bills of rights. So the states already had these established, and they were compiled by James Madison and submitted to the Continental Congress. Here's kind of the outline of the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution. Freedom of speech, bear arms, quartering soldiers, arrests, searches, rights of persons accused of crimes, rights of persons on trial, jury trials. That we talked about people not being arraigned and not being charged and all. That's 3, 5th, 6th, and 7th amendment right there. Limitations on bail and punishments and the rights that are kept by the people and the power kept by the state and the people. It looks like they're trying to erase and change our Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, spells out America's rights in relation to their government. It guarantees civil rights and liberties to the individual, like freedom of speech, press, and religion. It sets rules for due process, reserves all powers not delegated to the federal government to the people or the states, and it specifies that the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed, denied, disparaged to others. It is retained by the people. Then these are the ones 11 through 27. And those are the dates in parentheses that they were set for. So you can take a look at those and have those. So with the same thing in mind, to do what we are called to do with what we have to do it. Here's another little clip for you.
I don't know what to do, Cecil. I mean, every contractor's booked.
Does that sound working?
Not everyone.
Yes.
Okay, good.
No, I am not dealing with that guy again.
Look, I get it. All right? The man obviously has some issues.
That's a good way to put
Yeah.
it.
Well, I talked to Ed Reynolds yesterday. And he said Mr. Danielson is absolutely the best contractor on the list.
Cecil, so.
But yeah, there's more. See, Mr. Danielson on the surface, probably a little bit underneath too. Seems like a really bad guy. Probably is. I don't know. But you know, in talking to Ed, I find out that the guy, his business is struggling, for one thing. And then on top of that, the man is dealing with some serious family issues. So he's got a lot going on.
I mean, shouldn't we work with a contractor that wants to work with us?
Maybe that'll make you feel more comfortable. But that's not who we are. David, we're men of God. That means we made a commitment to choose a path he chose for us, not the one we want to choose. So, David, we go where he tells us to go. We do what he tells us to do, even if it makes us uncomfortable.
So yeah, you know, the idea here is several fold. Okay. The first thought pattern that we're dealing with is that if God calls you to do something in line with what it is of his will, you know, how do we respond? And in the case of Robert Morris, you know, it's the old term. He was all in. I mean, what else can the guy do but put up everything he had, everything he'd built, everything he had to finance what he thinks and what he's hearing is the will of God. And that is for America to surface as its own nation. So if that's the case, you know, are we willing to do that today? Are we willing to step up and do what we think God has for us to do as a nation, as a citizen of the state, as leaders of our family, no matter what the cost is? In other words, can you embrace the principle with everything you got? That's a tough thing to do. That's a tough thing without reserve to do. Yeah, you know, I can do it within limitations. Yeah, I can do it up to a certain point. But then when we start to get into what we want, you know, you have developed over a period of time certain assets for yourself. In the cases of our ages and all, it was called retirement, and you put up IRAs and corporate retirement plans and all of those things to go into a certain direction for what you had in mind of how you were going to spend your retirement. Are we willing to put all that at risk for God? Now I'm talking about for God. Are we willing to do that? The Israelites were. Robert Morris was. So, you know, now are we? And the reason why this is an important question for us is because we're coming under assault. We we are having a revolution that's undermining those principles on those three documents that I just showed you. Those documents are under attack. And those documents are the stability and the foundation of this country to be where we are today and who we are today. And, you know, you have to also look at that from 1776 to today. You know, there was a lot of God's blessings that came forth along that way for, I believe, various reasons, one of which is our constant commitment to the Abrahamic covenant and support of Israel. Those who bless you, he said to Abraham, I will bless. And so blessing the Jewish people has been something that America has stood alone to do. And I think that has a great deal to do with how God has blessed us. So that's the first thing we have to take a look at. Are we willing to do that? How far are we willing to go to do that? You know, Robert Morris, he went all the way. So it's a difficult thing and a difficult choice. But how much does it mean to you? Is it again lip service? Not only for this country, but what does it mean to you when God calls you to do something and you don't want to do it? You know, what do you do? How do you deal with it? How do you handle that? All of those are becoming more and more difficult things for us as we get even older than we are. They mean different things to 35-year-olds and 55-year-olds and 75-year-olds because your perspective and your resources are different. When you get to be 75 years old, are you still able to produce additional income as a cash flow, or are you dependent upon the vestiture of assets that you have accumulated? So you're not as much of a risk taker at 75 as you are at 35. If you think back, that's kind of the way we were back in those days. So what do you do when God calls you? How do you step up? And do you restrict that? God, I will do this, or God, I'll do this if you'll do that. You know, we're looking for assurances. We're looking for escape hatch. We're looking for safety net to fall back on. So I just thought that was kind of interesting that there's a lot of Robert Morris's in this country's background, not only financial people, but other people who brought their different crafts or skills to the effort. I was reading some articles about the British efforts of espionage and different efforts they had made to try to assassinate George Washington, and how they had tried to undermine some of these congressional meetings that were being held in secret, and how there was a spy network that was set up. So, it's not too different from the way it is now. The only difference is who are we fighting now? I think you're fighting all the above. You're fighting the Russians. You're fighting the Chinese. You're fighting the Islamic extremists, and you're fighting greedy, corrupt, left-wing people within this country. The bringing down of America is not a wave that is pushed by people of the same cloak. They all wear different jackets and they wear different cloaks, but the end result is the same for them. So they unify in that effort to bring America down. And that's pretty obvious of what they're trying to do. You know, when you see something that is being done and you say, boy, that's really stupid. Why would anybody do that? Well, think about that, because they didn't get to be where they are because they're stupid. You know, they got to be in positions where they are because they're crafty. And so some of the tactics that are being used are designed to appear to be stupid. And they do create chaos. They do create the crises that they then in turn think that they have the solution for. And they're the ones that created it. So don't be fooled into thinking that the left is not very smart, because they are. But they all have a different agenda. And the only common denominator is socialism, bringing the country down. So, you know, I've been asked by my wife over and over again, and some other people, why would these people do that? Well, you got to understand that the elitists and the bureaucrats think that they're above all that all the bad stuff is only going to happen to other people, not to them. And so the idea is to stabilize what they have in under control and make it an annualized thing where they don't have to concentrate on being crafty and surreptitious and undermining of what they do to get votes. They don't need votes. That they hold their way of power no matter what. So when you see things that are happening to us that are directly opposite, that are directly in defiance of the Constitution, you know, you have to ask yourself, well, what is it that they're doing? There's something here that I'm missing. There's something here that I'm not being told about. Well, they're going to go as far as they can. You pick up a book of Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky, and you read those tactics and you read those efforts. It says, go as far as you can until somebody stops you. Pretend that you're bigger than you are. And then grasp the communication networks and own the airways. And so, you know, you look at it and of what's happening, we see the reporting of it, and it makes these organizations look bigger than they really are. They're not that big, but there sure is a lot of money that flows into them and through them along those ways and capacities. So, you know, I thought this was an interesting thing to take a look at, because you know, God wasn't interested, I don't think, so much in value of things monetarily when he was talking about putting together what was needed for the tent of meeting. I think he was looking more at them possessing things for the future. You know, I'm saving this gold so that when we take over Canaan, you know, I'll have something to bargain with to set up my farm, and I'll have some gold that I can make and buy things with. And gosh, if I give him all my gold, I can't do that, you know, and that's the key phrase, my gold. Whose gold was it actually? It was the Egyptians' gold, who God got them to give to his people, but then they would possess that, you know. It's mine now. I've been carrying it now for over a month. So, and it's heavy and I have to keep transporting. It's mine. When you remember the guy, Ananias, the guy that buried when they were doing wars in the promised land, and he'd take over the spoils and he buried them in his tent. Remember that? And God said, you can't do that. And so what did they do to him? Anybody remember?
The ground opened up and he got swallowed.
They killed them all.
Yep.
They killed them all. And the horse they rode in on, So the idea here is that God's serious about these things. And we have to remember, where did we get that blessing from? Where did we get that thing from that we consider to be valuable? It was from God. And it's just like the people of Israel. Where do they get that land from? They got it from God. So we got to make whatever we have available to him to use however he wants to use it. And when we're able to do that, when we're able to do the one thing that the smart rich people do, then we'll be better off. What they do, they have their dealers at these casinos. As they leave the table, they go, I got nothing. I'm not taking anything. I'm not owning anything. I'm not using anything. And kind of that's the way approach that we've got to take, is that whatever assets we got are God's assets. He gave them to us. Oh yeah, well, I earned them. I spent years and years working on this thing to get that and do that. Yeah, right. Sure you did. Yeah. But it starts to get personal, and it starts to get right down to the quick, when God starts calling us on things that we keep. It's the same concept really as the sacrificial lamb, the Passover lamb. They have to bring that lamb into their house and have that lamb live with them for a while before they sacrifice it. Did you know that?
Yes.
Yeah, they you bring that in, and your kids give the lamb a name, and it becomes a pet of the household. And then you got to kill it. You got to give it up to God. There's a reason why he did that. There's no sacrifice to something you don't care about. The sacrifice is only something that you care about or you value or that you use. That's when it's a sacrifice. A sacrifice, We're supposed to give our tithes to the church. 10% is what we're giving to tithes. So, anything above a tithe is sacrifice. So consider that. So that's the deal for the day, boys. That's your browbeating for the day. I've already browbeat myself in the mirror several times in practice and getting ready for this. So thank you for letting me do it to you what I did to myself. So there you go.